right, folks, we're going to get started here in about 2 minutes, but we're going to ask everybody who's in the last 3 rows to actually move up because the wait staff are going to be preparing for lunch, and I know you all are going to want to eat, so they're going to want to put boxes around the tables, and then when we have the break, that'll give them just the opportunity to do these first 3 rows. So if you'll come sit in the first 3 rows of tables, that will really help the wait staff be able to do what they need to do so that we can have lunch on time today and keep for the program started. So thank you so very much for accommodating us. Good morning. Welcome to the Sector Partnerships 101 session. So glad that you all could join us. And Deb has got a wonderful tool if you haven't picked it up yet. Iowa has just developed the first in a 3-part series of Sector Partnership Toolkit. And so some of you who were in the last session may have gotten it already, but if you haven't, we certainly want you to have it because it'll be helpful as we move along today. You have it? Deb does not want to take all those back with her when she leaves, so. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Beth Brinly, and I'm with the firm Mayer & Mayer. I have a little over 30 years experience now in education, economic development, and workforce development, primarily in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and then worked for the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Labor in the Philadelphia regional offices, and came back to Kentucky to be the Commissioner of the Department of Workforce Investment and then the Deputy Secretary for Education and Workforce Development before I came to Mayer. And I love working with Mayer & Mayer because I've probably had a 20-year working relationship with them between my federal work and my state work, and they've been a great partner. So we're going to be talking here about Sector Partnerships 101. And so in that conversation, we're going to talk broadly around sector strategies and some key elements of those that we've learned from various state and regional work going on. I'm going to also share a sector partnerships definition, and your toolkit has a lot around that as well. Going to do a little bit of conversation around customer-centered design. For those of you who were in the last session, we talked about it probably more in detail, but I'm going to give some very specific business examples about how customer-centered design can help with your sector partnership work going on. And then talk about the relationship between the new Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act and sector partnerships. So we will get underway. So first of all, sector strategies is truly an employer-centric solution. Employers should be leading the conversation and leading the work of the partnership as you undertake things. One of the important things is that it really is taking a sector strategy approach is paying attention to and responding to the needs of business and industry, and making sure that you're doing that on a regional level or on a state level, depending on what your conversation point is. Iowa has identified some state-targeted sectors. In the toolkit that you have great labor market information. It is a snapshot in time about what your regional economy looks like, and what sectors are important in their relationship, and that's important so that you can really have a good conversation about not only what is currently critical for your sector and your community, but what is it that you can take advantage of that are natural resources that you really haven't tapped into that could bring new resources. It's also a way to do long-term planning strategies in regard to a regional economy. Wayne Gretzky, who's a wonderful hockey player, always talked about the fact that he did not skate to where the puck was, but he skated to where the puck was going. And so in our workforce development world, we not only have to meet the short-term and immediate needs of businesses when it comes to sector work and career pathway work, but we also have to help them be prepared for the long term. And so many times in so many of our communities, we have become so dependent upon one particular sector. In Eastern Kentucky, it was coal. And over the last 3 years, they lost 70% of their regional economy because the coal industry has gone into hiatus. So they had done some sector work, but not to the pace that they are doing sector work now, because even if coal comes back, they want a more diversified regional economy to make sure that there's stability for the workforce. And there are workers who are just simply tired of being laid off and being called back and being laid off and being called back, and they have transferable skills that allow them. So the next thing is it consists of goals, policies, plans of action on how you're going to cultivate and support those targeted sectors. And those are joint policies among your partners. It's about building unified business and industry relationships. It's about making sure that we bring all the resources to bear in a cohesive manner for our business partners, and that the things that we're doing are reinforcing the value of those sectors as we go along. The next is that there's a proven framework for addressing and engaging business in education and training. So it's not enough just for the business to say, look, we're going to be hiring, 100% auto maintenance technicians. We need them involved in the curriculum development. We need them involved with offering work-based learning opportunities. Everything from internships to shadowing to on-the-job training to apprenticeships, so that one of the things they're always looking for is somebody with the qualifications but the experience as well. The next is requiring elements of the regional plan to be in alignment with what the needs are in the community. So the investment strategies that we're making with training dollars, whether it's in the formula funding in Title I, whether it's contextualizing adult education in Title II, whether it's providing the ongoing labor market information and matching services in Title III, or it's the training resources that we invest in our customers under Title IV with vocational rehabilitation, we should be looking to create opportunities that pay a family-sustaining wage and get them on a career path that leads them to that, if not gets them there with the first training. So that's why sector strategies are so important. What are some of the success factors or the critical elements of a great sector strategy? First of all, it's anchored in great data. And fortunately, in the next session on forming sector partnerships, our friends at EMSI are going to be joining me in the presentation and talking about tools that you already have at your disposal here in Iowa that can support your state and regional sector work. We want to make sure you can take full advantage of what's there. So having that great data is an important conversation starter. And for those of you who were in the session that we were in just before, it is often workforce intelligence that keeps our employers at the table in our sector partnerships. They're founded on a regional vision. There should be a dialogue going on as you're working on regional plans and local plans under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, if that's the only impetus. There are far more impetuses than just that law, to have a vision for your region. Because having that vision around those sectors is critical to knowing how to best use our resources. And so having that alignment between economic development, education, all the way from K through university, and our other training partners that are outside the public workforce system, our community-based organizations, our workforce system, all of those partners sharing in that regional vision is critical to the success of those sector partnerships. Because if we don't have agreement and alignment on what those sectors are, then the federal pool, the state pool, the local pool isn't getting any bigger. We have to work smarter, not harder, on that particular effort. So the next is that those sector strategies are guided by industry. And it can only be guided by industry by having their input and their direction. They know what new technologies are coming into their field and how they have to prepare their incumbent and emerging workforce to be tuned in. In Kentucky, we had a sector partnership on advanced manufacturing that worked with the advanced manufacturers, and they identified 16 career pathways. And they said, here's how many people we need today in those pathways, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and 10 years from now. And they sat and had a conversation with the education and workforce community and economic development community and said, here are the certifications, here are the credentials, here are the things, and we need you to help us with the alignment of that. Because oftentimes, when you don't have agreement on that vision and career pathway and it's not industry-led, we make connections between adult ed and community colleges and universities around sector partnerships, but it's connected like this as opposed to connected like this. And so that's where business driving the conversation is a really important part of the work that we need to do. So that industry conversation then led to strategic alignment of resources from K through the university and our other community partners who are trainers within our system. And that is really what the new federal law is asking us to do, to bring about smart alignment of those resources. And then to transform how services are delivered. And sector strategies can play a big role in that. I know of local workforce investment areas that now have career centers or America's Job Centers that are organized by the sector. And they have a business advisory board that is advising the operational partners within that career center about what training needs to be going on in there, what certifications they're doing, their interviews there. That center is an advanced manufacturing one They've just launched a healthcare one. There are local workforce investment areas and America Job Centers that now have sector orientations to their career center so that they know what services are available focused in the sector interest of that customer. There are new partnerships in states between community colleges, adult education, and workforce development around an initiative called Accelerating Opportunities, where adult ed is being team taught with technical skills, and they have a success coach who helps them navigate the college campus, and they have a career coach from the workforce system who's helping them get their work-based experience and internships to support them, and they have a support class where they can answer questions, and they have a cohort of peers that are going through the program with them at the same time. Kentucky's been modeling this as well as 14 other states over the last 3 years. I know in Kentucky that these students who were deemed basic skills deficient, they either didn't have a high school diploma or tested below basic skills deficient even though they had it, are outperforming the general cohort registered in the same programs of study. Outperforming. So now the conversation in Kentucky is, how do we change our developmental education programs in community colleges? Because on average nationwide, 2% of the people who start in developmental ed actually complete a certificate or training program that they came to get engaged with. This is revolutionizing. This is the type of work that takes place when we have this type of strategic alignment of resources and services. And then finally, our measuring, improving, and sustaining, that we as a system of partners are committed to continuous improvement. We might have great working relationships with our business partners today to meet their current business needs, but we have to be committed to always reevaluating, making sure that the changes we're making are getting them the results they want, and if they're not, being willing to change. And it can't be 3 years from now. It has to be in a timely fashion to meet businesses' needs. Their long term oftentimes is 3, 6, 9 months. It's not 2 years to get through the accreditation process. So we have to be creative through micro certifications and other things that can allow us to meet those employers' needs on a timely basis. So here are some examples of some strategic approaches to partnerships. So first of all, that you have the state and regional data that has informed your strategic plan and that of the work of your sector partnership. Really, really important. That you have really clear goals and action steps outlined in the strategic plan that you can hold each other accountable to as partners in the work that you're doing, because this is a partnership effort. That the industry partnership actually engages the key industries in that sector. And with that, there are some great tools that you can use that help you identify the social leadership in your community. Those are the people who, when someone picks up the phone, they'll come to a meeting. They'll write a check. They'll get them to do something that other folks may not be interested in doing on their own. And so that's an important part of this process. And so we have the sector employees. They give clear direction to the one-stop system regarding what and how they should be doing their work. So, I talked about this industry partnership around manufacturing. The way this happened was the business community put up the money with the community college to develop and build an advanced manufacturing building. They actually raised the money and helped the community college build the building. And after 5 years, they had 5 graduates from the program. And they said, we have got to get to the bottom of what this problem is. And so there were twofold problems. One, was when they did the talent pipeline survey, which was talking to the education community and students, they found out that they had an image problem, not surprising with manufacturing. Dirty, dark, and dangerous. That's what they thought. Well, the manufacturing of today is not. It's advanced technology. It is at the heart of. And so they created an ambassador program where they brought young people in the 8th grade and the 9th grade into the advanced manufacturing environment, and then empowered those young people to talk to their peers, their guidance counselors, their parents, their teachers, their principals, and their superintendents about what advanced manufacturing really looks like today and how excited they were about it. And so that pipeline began to flow with that process. The other thing was that there were key curriculum changes that needed to be made, and the business community said, look, you're teaching the wrong type of welding. You're using an outdated technique or support. So to keep those programs alive and in tune with where the industry trend is going, we need our partners to be involved with the curriculum process of this work as well. So the next thing that we can talk about there is that we coordinate among all the services to make sure that our career pathways are in line, they make sense, they result in the certificates, the credentials, the degrees that the employer community values within that sector, partnership effort, because you can build it, they won't necessarily come or recommend folks to be engaged if it isn't meeting their specific needs. Engage in a collaborative, demand-driven approach. Yesterday we had an employer panel here, and even before we got on stage, we had a conversation where they said, Beth, if you saw the list of all of the business relations folks and all of our partners in the workforce system, it would make your head spin. Small businesses, oftentimes the president is the president, the HR director, and they don't have time to have 20 meetings with 20 different partners to talk about their unique program. What they know is they have a problem. It is a talent development problem, and they need help. And so asking a couple of questions, having one partner be the conduit to that company, coming back to all the partners, and having a conversation about how we solve that problem together is essential. The other thing is that we want levels of engagement. What a small business can do versus what a large business can do oftentimes is different. They're different roles but play important functions in the process. And so the other is that we have to kind of do the relationship building, and that doesn't happen overnight. So we need to meet the business where they are and how they want to engage with us, and do friend raising, move them from I'm willing to do a shadow program to an OJT to an apprenticeship to providing a scholarship program. And that won't happen overnight just because you ask. You know, it takes that relationship building. So that's why it's important that it's collaborative and it's demand-driven. It's focused on them and what their needs are. And then finally, develop linkages with employers to encourage employers to actually use the workforce system, whether it's the job matching system and other services. We can do pre-screening for them, for applicants. You know, one of the hiring folks yesterday said that they go through 150 resumes a day. And that's a lot. And if they're doing 150 and getting one, or they get 10 from us as the workforce system and get 9 they can hire, that saves them a lot of money. And if they get 10 that they can hire, or 9 that can hire, and we've trained them on how to be good long-term employees and not just to get the job, then that saves them a lot of money too in retention and support. So These are some of the examples of how you can take a sector strategy approach to your work. So let's talk a little bit about sector partnerships and what's the difference between a sector strategy and a sector partnership. Sector strategy is that overarching thread that you weave through your career center certification process, your unified business service strategy, the sector partnership is the foundational element that gives you the driver on where should we put our individual training account money? Where should we be focusing on job training? Where should we be focusing with apprenticeship? What career pathways do we need to be building, modernizing, changing, updating, those sorts of things? That rests with the sector partnership. We will know that we have been successful with our sector partnership when we quit asking businesses to go to 20 different meetings to say the same things over again. And instead, we all go. The Community Colleges Advisory Board is the sector partnership. The K-12 systems use that sector partnership as its advisory board. Adult Ed uses it as its advisory board. The workforce system uses it as its advisory board for all of the work that we're doing. And believe it or not, I've actually raised that question with the Department of Ed and the Assistant Secretary for Octay and Employment and Training Administration, and they said it's perfectly acceptable. Yes, we have requirements for business advisory groups, but those sector partnerships can be it. And the reason why is that small business person and even the large business person doesn't have the time to come and tell their story to each individual elementary school, middle school, high school, community college, university, adult ed program, career center. We need to work smarter, not harder with them, because if we don't, we lose them. So that sector partnership is the hub of that. It is employer-led, meaning they set the agenda, and we as the business partners and the community partners are important to the process, but we are not the drivers of the process. We may facilitate, we may make changes, but our effort is to really let the employers lead. Because if we don't let the employers lead, they're going to walk. And so if you already have a sector partnership that you're engaged in and you're struggling for business engagement, I'd be calling them and saying, why did I lose you? One of the best ways that we can find out about that. So all the critical partners are around the table listening and responding to what the employer community says. And the activities improve the quality of training and educational programs within the region that provide the talent supply that they need to stay in Iowa, to grow in Iowa, and to expand here. So, what are the elements of really diving into a good strategic plan? And some of this is going to sound a little redundant, and I show state and regional here because depending on where you are in the conversation, these are still the very same elements. Just reinforcing the importance of that data, that you develop the leadership team, and sometimes that means there are already industry associations that exist for the sectors that you're interested in, and you might need to simply convene a leadership group among the number of partners that already exist to serve as a sector panel. Because some folks aren't going to want to give up their already affiliated groups, but we can have a synergy that then filters through their existing partnership relationships. They're going to come up with their vision. They're going to assess the talent needs that they have and do a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the business community is going to paint that picture for us, and then we're going to define the strategies and align the resources to meet their needs. That's what the plan looks like, right? And then we're going to implement it, We're going to determine whether we're on target or not on target and move forward. Questions at this point about either the process or the difference between sector strategies and sector partnerships? Yes. Yep. All the PowerPoints are going to be posted on the website. And I added a few slides from when we talked last, based on our conversation earlier. So I wanted to talk a little bit about one of the relations to tie this back to the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So sector strategies and career pathways are a critical part of the law, and it's built into all of the titles. And when we looked at the proposed regulations, 143 times they use the word customer. So there's a shift, and how we can see that is how they organize state workforce boards and local workforce boards. 71% of the board composition is now customers. Between business customers and workforce representatives, they make up 71% of the board. And those boards are supposed to be driving the investment strategy. And so our being in tune with what our customers need and want is all the more important. And I know any day now we're going to get those new final regs that are going to, over 2,000 pages, the rumors are. I don't know what the overwhelming. So for some of you who were in the last session, you were introduced to this concept a little earlier. But I want to talk about how customer-centered design can make sure that your sector partnership can be a very strong and healthy thing. So there are 5 elements to customer-centered design. The first is research, and that means that we are inspired by our customers. And sector partnerships are anchored exactly to do that. It's where we hear our customers' voice on what they need and what their long-term needs are, what their short-term needs are, and we can help have a conversation about what are the priorities we need to focus on to help them be successful. The second piece of this is about synthesizing. We can gather this information through the sector partnership. We can conduct individual interviews. We can conduct group interviews with employers. We can take data that we have received and validate that data with them. And that's really important. When we were working on our state sector work in Kentucky, we chose 5 sectors. One of our sectors ended up being auto and aircraft manufacturing. When we looked at the data, there would have been no indication that we should be doing that. But between our business partners and our economic development partners, we learned that the state was making huge investments in Ford and Toyota and GM in our plants in Kentucky. And so auto and aircraft manufacturing became an important sector despite what the data had told us originally. Another one where that was the case was energy creation and transmission. When we looked at the data, it looked like a very stable workforce, that they were well-staffed, but our friends in the energy and creation transmission community said, we are going to lose 70% of our workforce in the next 5 years. So we went to work with our community college partners and others to create lineman training and various other forms of training, and just totally ramped up energy creation and transmission types of certifications in our community colleges and our universities and apprenticeships and OJTs so that we could make sure that they could ride the storm of this huge turnover within their workforce. So synthesizing or doing the research, making sure we're hearing from all the different customers, and synthesizing the major themes, prioritizing where our investments should be. And then the next phase of this is to ideate. which means to brainstorm with your team of folks around the table about what is it that we can do differently based on what we've heard and those common themes from the business community. The next thing we need to do is to prototype that. So what we want to do in this phase is we want to fail fast. If we have an idea and we apply it to our processes and it doesn't yield the results, we quit doing it and find something else because it's important to that. And then finally, once we think we have the model for meeting the need, to test it. So when you're doing a customer-centered design process, you have to have a design team that is part of that process. And it's really important that you get folks from a lot of different perspectives. You want to engage your customer in that process if you can do so. You want to make sure that you have about 5 to 8 people. So we typically say 8 so that if a few drop off, you still have a good group of people to work with. And when you're thinking about putting this team together, especially when you're focusing on business services, you want to make sure you have your core partners who have business service types of responsibilities around the table. Our veterans program folks, our VR business service folks, our economic development business folks in the region, others that can bring that are doing that type of work. You want to also take a look and make sure that you have folks that are from the frontline staff. Because oftentimes they're the folks who are working directly with our customers that can offer important perspective to that. Also, our customers. So think about stakeholders who are touching the customer. Think about the partners that are with us in service strategies. And so those are the types of folks you want to have around the table when you embark in a customer-centered design approach. When you're doing your research, doing an employer panel or discussion can be important, and I know that you all have learned a lot about convening already, but I just want to give you a sample of how small changes can make a big difference in sending the message about who a sector partnership is about. So when you're having that conversation, you should have the employers sitting around the table, and we as the partners should be sitting on the outside of that circle, listening. And we need to get comfortable with the fact that we should not outnumber the employers in the room. And that having 5 people from the same department, whether it's our one-stop or whether it's our community college or our K-12 system, is overwhelming and threatening to our employer partners. And because we want to talk when we want to fill in the gaps when the conversation lasts. And so sitting around on the outside and listening, make sure that they understand that this is about them and we're here to support them. That doesn't mean that we're subservient to them. We are in a partnership relationship, but they need to be driving the conversation. And instead of, I can't tell you how many stories I've heard from folks who serve on business advisory committees, and they say, we go to the business advisory committee, it's a 2-hour meeting, and an hour and a half of it is, here's what we're doing for you. And then when it's time for me to share what I think is important, they're packing up their bags, they're looking at their watch, and they're shutting down the reception and getting the coffee off and out the door. It starts with them. And then we can talk about what solutions, not what programs. Our objective is to not fit our businesses into our programs, but to tailor our solutions to meet the business's problem. Another great way to work with your business community to get a sense of, in the sector partnership, about how to work with them and how to prioritize our work is card sorting. This shows different sectors, but if you, as we heard from that advanced manufacturing group that they had 16 career pathways that they needed the system to support. Well, we know we can't facilitate and support the standing up of 16 career pathways at one time, most likely in our region. So we're going to need the business community to prioritize those pathways. So doing a card sorting exercise where we listed those 16 pathways and had the employers sitting around the table to prioritize those cards can be a great way to quickly assess what the priorities are and reach consensus to be able to respond to the work that they're doing. Another technique is to have a sticky wall. And what this is an example for a sector partnership that was in Missouri, in a rural community in Missouri, when they invited the business partners to come to the table for their very first meeting. They asked them to come into the meeting and to write what their major workforce challenges were on cards. So then they went through a process of sorting those into the themes. And then the next step of this was, after the business community left that sector partnership discussion, the partners stayed and they did some solutions brainstorming and identifying and establishing work groups to address the challenges by those categories that the employer community did. So we got what we needed from the business community. What were their major pain points? Then the partners stayed after that session to really talk about how do we address those pain points. So then they're not in the excruciating business of sitting and listening to our machinations about how we're going to solve their problem. They just want to know there's a solution to the problem. They don't necessarily have to be, we can present the package to them and they can validate our strategy, but they don't have to see how the sausage is made. And sometimes we like to do that or think we need to do that with them. The other that I wanted to talk about was, as you're working as a design team, this is an example of from Nebraska, where they had a conversation about career pathways and the critical elements of career pathways, and used this game board to have a conversation among the partners about whether or not they are providing all of the elements of a successful career pathway. Doing it based off this board versus, kind of neutralizes the conversation. It gives everybody the idea, it gives them the opportunity to show where things might be missing without really being confrontational with other partners about that, which can be a really important thing and a way to build some cohesion among your group. So I've done a quick overview of customer-centered design, of some of the key characteristics of good sector partnerships and good sector strategies work. Are there questions that you guys have that you'd like to ask me? Yes. Yep. So there's a couple of ways that you can go about that. First of all, so the concern was some of the data that we get is years old, and so how do we make sure that we have current data? So one of the best ways is to actually do field interviews with business, or to share that data in the meeting with your sector partners and ask them to validate that data. That's one of the ways. That's how we learned about auto and aircraft manufacturing being important, and our work around energy creation and transmission. It was by validating the data with the business partners. Another way is that there are tools out there. We're going to, in the next session, you'll have an opportunity to see what you already have at your fingertips through EMSI. There are lots of companies that actually do real-time labor market information now, but you can't go solely on real-time labor market information either, because sometimes that's based on spidering, and so they're getting the same job posting through other places, and the count gets over-duplicated. And so you have to balance between those long-term projections and the real-time data to find the right mix. But there's thinking of entities that are in that game, EMSI, Chamorro Economics, Bradstreet and Dunn. There are a number of usually, if you talk to your economic development partners, they have oftentimes that real-time data, because oftentimes when they're meeting with companies to talk about coming and staying or locating in they want to know where the current workforce is and who has the right credentials and where they are in pathways and things like that. And economic development partners oftentimes have that real-time data at their fingertips, because they have to have it in order to do the pitches that they're doing with companies. So great question. So those are a couple examples. Other questions? Yes. And what I always say about that is it depends. It depends on your community. It depends on who those businesses trust. Sometimes it's the workforce system, the folks in the career center. Sometimes it's the community college folks. Sometimes it's a different partner based on the relationships that have been developed. And so I don't make a hard and fast rule of it. The key is that you have somebody that people respect and trust. So great question, Deb. Other folks with questions? So I want to tie this work a little bit to this guide and what's in here for you. So this is the first in a three-part series that the state's putting on in regard to Sector Partnerships Toolkit. And the thing that I like about it is that it does talk about what a sector partnership is. It breaks down the steps of forming a sector partnership. It gives self-assessment at various stages of sectors. It gives you a checklist of key things that you need to do to build out your sector partnerships. And they break it into planning phases, emerging partnerships, sustaining partnerships, and we'll be talking more about those two steps in this process as we go along. When you take a look at the sector's partnership framework, it almost mirrors what we talked through in those planning elements, as well as the key success strategies that are there. Then talks about data informed decision making. It actually provides regional profiles, like I said, a snapshot in time in regard to different communities within Iowa. And it shows what key positions, what percentage growth is there, what are some of the NAICS codes associated with occupations in those. You can then go to the NAICS codes and get the job competencies. When you go to ONET to investigate those positions. Talks about identifying the partners who should be around the table, and a number of other different steps. Industry mind mapping, preparing the action plan, email templates for outreach to your employer community, then also a checklist for setting up and maintaining partnerships, and also provides just a whole list of additional resources. So what I'm going to ask at this point is that each of you go to the common principles of sector partnerships, and I know that there have been some sector partnership work going on, and so I'm going to ask you to take about 5 minutes at your table to have a conversation about these common principles and whether or not your existing partnerships that you're aware of are operating within the context of those principles. And then if the answer is no to some of these principles, I want you to do a little brainstorming around what are the strategies that you might want to use to address that. So it's about 10:18 right now, so I'll give you till 10:25 to have a discussion at your table around these values. Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. It's on page 3 in the book, and there are 5 specific principles. Have a conversation about any sector partnership work you know that's going on in your community and whether or not they're honoring those principles, and if not, then what are some of the things that you might be able to do to address those? And then we'll walk around and have a little sharing time. If you don't have a copy of it, the document, feel free. Or if you're sitting at a table by yourself, join another table. Like it. Oh. I'm going to come around to a couple tables and see who wants to share some of their thoughts. I'm going to start right here. In particular, from your discussion, you'd like to share with the group about sector work that's going on and things that you might want to do to take it to the next level? Shaking their head no. Okay, well, I know this group of people have been with me for a while, so anything that you all would like to share from your discussion?
Just all of us talked about the importance of having a facilitator, and that's something that we feel we don't have within our region. The question is how you provide a support for that, how do you fund that, those type of things.
Well, it just so happens that Iowa is getting ready to roll out, I think in October, facilitator training and facilitator and convener resources and organizing something. So percolate on that, but there are a couple of ways that you might be able to do that. One is that you may take a look among your partners to see if everyone's willing to put a little bit of money into supporting that business liaison facilitator, that business lead that would be working with and convening and supporting. Another is that in some local workforce investment areas, they have identified people in the system that are actually serving as what I would call the facilitator for the business community and working with the individual customers that are in the career centers. So they're working both sides of the supply and demand discussion and facilitate that with the community. So that's another example of how folks have been doing that. So I'm going to come back here. How was your all's discussion? Anything that you want to share, an idea, concern that you're struggling with?
Maybe we didn't follow directions. No, we were chatting a little bit about, we have a board chair here with us today, and so we were chatting through a little bit about how do we, reacting to some of the approaches that were shared and how that might work best for us. And so particularly it was about businesses primarily being around the table, partners being around the outside, and how do you make sure that it stay business focused so that we're using their time well.
Right. And so were there any suggestions around that?
More reflection about what's working for us. And right.
Okay, great. How about over here? I couldn't resist that style.
Our conversation was just about, we have some partnerships already forming, so how do we make them stronger? And then those partnerships are within the manufacturing and healthcare, and we're struggling at developing those business partners. What are some strategies to...
So the most important suggestion that I can have is having business recruit business is the most effective way. They like us workforce people. We're really nice people, but they really respect their peers in the field. Another way that you might do that is to work with industry associations and chambers who are always brokering with business and industry, and have them host a launch meeting or an organizational meeting to be able to come to the table. They may feel more comfortable if they're invited by their association, their trade association, or the local chamber, and have them host. So those are a couple examples. So with that, oh, yes.
Yeah, we have several organizations that have already gone down this road and have really gotten a good start on developing sector strategies, sector partnerships. But there's 3 different entities, and trying to bring that all together. How do you do that without stepping on their toes, or how do you bring those groups together to the same table rather than having them off on their own?
So interestingly, there was some work in Kentucky in the manufacturing field where they decided they wanted to organize in a more structured manner to bring different organizations together. So they created, this was from the business community, they established a state-level sector panel or board that oversaw manufacturing. And then they, as business folks in the respective regions, had convening meetings with all of the existing sector partnerships to say, we'd like for you to think about working in this kind of new environment. And they did a charter for each of the regions on their sector work to bring different sector partnerships that were in the same field together. So it's called the Kentucky FAME, Federation of Advanced Manufacturing. And so you can even go to, if you put in Kentucky FAME, you can see how they organize themselves, their governing piece, their chartering process, that sort of thing might be helpful to you. So great idea. I mean, a great question, because lots of times this work has begun, and also we have to recognize that sometimes sector partnerships do struggle when the regional economy took a nosedive or when the national economy took a nosedive. A lot of great sector partnerships kind of put themselves on hold because they knew that they were in a down cycle, and so they put their partnership on hold and picked it back up when the economy changed. So with this, I want to thank you for being part of Sector Partnerships 101. Our next conversation is going to be on forming sector partnerships, and the big part of this is going to be our friends from EMSI coming and sharing the labor market information that you already can tap into at your fingertips and how you can use that information to help focus and prioritize your sectors and that sort of thing. So I really want to encourage you to stay around for the next session. And our final one in this series is on maintaining sector partnerships. So thanks and hope you picked up a few things.